Hello again. This has been a really short break. So right now we're back with our second to last session of the day. This session is called Fostering Allowances. And it's a session that we know a lot of people are interested in. We get so many questions about this all the time on social media, on email, everywhere. So this is basically where we hear about a rundown of every single cost that is involved with fostering, how much the salary is. It's not really a salary. In fostering terms, it's called a fostering allowance. And so we're going to learn about all of the words that are used inside of fostering, which are completely new for most of us if we have never worked in fostering before. They were completely new to me several months ago. And now we're going to introduce everything to you. Our host for this session is going to be Verna. She creates fostering training for people who are working together with Banya to get approved to become foster carers. And so she's very well versed in this topic. Oh, I hear an echo. Sorry about that. I will have to mute myself soon. So welcome, Verna. Thank you so much for joining us. I have your slides, so please let me know when you're ready to share them and I will share them for you.
Okay. So what I'm thinking is, could you just bear with me a moment? I'll just email myself my slides on another screen so I can be on this screen, but also use the other slides. If you see what I mean. Just bear with me a moment.
No worries.
Okay. So you're just going to use two of the slides that from my slideshow, yeah?
Exactly. The two that I showed you yesterday, those are the ones that I can share.
Yeah, okay, but I'll go through the PowerPoint of what I've got for the full presentation. Okay, so we ready? Ready to go? Good. Okay, so hello everyone. I have been listening on and off throughout the day. I've just been really moved by, particularly moved by the personal stories, I have to say. And that really touches my heart. And I think that's the heart of what we're all about. We're all here for the same end result. The aim is to be able to see the outcomes of children who have journeyed through the care system. And everyone has got some input into that from within Banya in one way or another. But at the heart of all of the work that we do are the foster carers who deliver the work directly from their homes, in their hearts, to the children, to some of our most vulnerable children within society. And when we hear some of the amazing outcomes and changes and transformations of that journey, we've heard from the foster carers who've got the children currently being cared for, and we've heard from the stories of the now adults who've come through the other end. It's that really can't be, you can't beat that for rewards, as Lizzie said, in terms of seeing the outcomes of the work. So yeah, I'm really passionate about fostering, and I've worked within fostering and adoption over too many years to count now. I've stopped counting because otherwise I'll show my age. Okay, that's just between Nyasha and I. She's still on the line. I don't know if she's still with us. Okay, so I'm going to talk to you about fostering allowances, and maybe by design or default, it has come at the end of the day, because it's not about, this is not the be all and end all of the fostering work, as many of our foster carers who've presented and the children will pay testament to. You really can't put a price on the care that is given to a child's life to make them, to give them what they need to come through the other end of what often is a long journey, a traumatic journey, and a very, you know, can be quite a memorable time with lots of ups and downs. But at the end of the day, we are a business and we do pay our foster carers an allowance, and that allowance does go some way to supporting and helping the placement to progress and to meet the needs of the children. So when we talk about fostering allowances, we really are looking at a way in which our foster carers can be rewarded and recognised for the work that they are doing, and to enable them to care for the children in their care. And as you've heard throughout the day, where Theo talked about some of the mythbusters, you know, some people are giving up jobs to actually provide this work that they are passionate about wanting to offer. So invariably, you know, it does need to be recognised with some financial reward. So the fostering allowance that each carer receives, there's a two-tier, because there's an inner London amount and an outer London amount. Overall, the amount is between £300 and £400 a week, and that allowance includes an amount that's should be used towards holidays. So that's annual holidays that the family may take. So there's an expectation that from that 400 or £300 to £400 a week that you receive in your hands, that you will actually be able to budget for a holiday that you may want to take once a year, or however many times a year you're able to afford to, but there's an expectation that you would contribute from your allowance towards the holiday. In the same way, children will celebrate birthdays, and there'll be Christmas and Easter or other traditional celebrations that go on throughout the year. We do have our Muslim families who celebrate Eid and Ramadan. So those festivals, festive seasons are also recognised, but the allowance needs to be taken into account, that whatever the cost towards providing a gift and, you know, whatever is needed for those occasions, that the child will be appropriately you know, kitted out with their outfits or costs towards extras that are needed. If you could just flip back to that slide again, Mappa. I will just mention, because we, in that breakdown, even though we have said it's £400 a week, what we actually take out of that £400 before you get the allowance is £18.40, as you will see, quite specific amount, and that amount is taken out each week from your allowance, and it's put into what we call a Respite Savings account that is built up over the year, and then once a year you will get that money back. So that money is just put aside, it's taken out, but it's given back to you once a year. It equates to 2 weeks allowance. So if you had the same child over the duration of a 12-month period, you would get the equivalent of 2 weeks allowance that you can use towards any aspect of respite that you want. So that could contribute towards a holiday that you want to take with the children, or it could contribute towards having the child cared for if you were going off on a holiday or a break, or some kind of respite that you needed where you weren't able to take the children, or it wasn't appropriate to take the children, because sometimes the local authorities you know, are not able to give consent for the child to travel for a number of reasons. It might be that the child doesn't have a passport, or that the care order hasn't allowed for the child to travel abroad, and therefore that child needs to be looked after while you're away, and that money can be used then to pay the carer that is going to look after the child in your absence. As you would have heard from Theo earlier on, respite carers and your backup support are a big part of what we look at when we are approving you as foster carers, so that you have a network of support in place for occasions when there may be situations where you can't care for the child. You can actually use some of your respite money to pay for that care to be taken care of while you do what you need to do. So that money does come each year. If you've had the child, obviously it's pro rata. So for every week that you have the child, that amount does build up, and then it accumulates to the 2 weeks over a year, and you get that money back in July of each year. That is paid back to you. So the amount that we've mentioned in terms of the allowance is a government, is an amount that has already been worked out in terms of understanding what the cost would be to care for a child, that we think is a reasonable amount that will meet the needs of the child. Foster children will come very often with lots of extra additional needs. Some children will come to you where they've got nothing but clothes that they're standing in, and you will need to, you know, support that child in providing the necessary clothing and you know, anything that they need in terms of equipment, maybe toys or books or things that they need to become settled and part of your family. The other thing about the reason why quite a significant amount is allocated towards clothing and care of the child is because our foster children, as we've heard earlier on, you know, will have come through a journey of trauma and difficulties that they may have experienced in either coming into care in the first place, or that they've had a number of placements, which we've heard about earlier. And that can mean that children get very distressed and maybe quite inappropriate in the way that they might care for their belongings, in a way that you wouldn't necessarily expect from a child who has had a stable, loving home. And by that I mean that some of our children might not look after their things, may disregard, you know, the importance of caring for, you know, their clothes and their belongings. They may lose things. They may not have a sense of responsibility around making sure that they've collected their jumper from school or their coat. You may find that you're having to replace things over a period of time, more so than you would normally. So you wouldn't expect to, you know, be buying more than one winter coat a year, but with foster children you might have to buy more than one, because they've either left the one that you had bought at school, or they've moved placements and the one that they had in the previous placement hasn't been followed on with them, so you've had to replace and give them another set of outfits to go through the next season. So overall, children who do come into foster care, you know, you will find that you're having to replace things and top up, you know, items of clothing and so on, probably more than you would do for your own children. Some children, we heard about self-harming earlier, you know, some children will bite or chew or suck on their clothes, you know, they will, you know, kind of pull at them, and what's behind this is often the trauma that they may have experienced, where, you know, that's their way of expressing the feelings that they can't otherwise express in a more appropriate way. Okay. Right. So the breakdown of the allowance, we've talked about clothing. Over the age range of children that we have that come into care, so we have them from naught, you know, very young children, babies, right up to 17, 18 years old. And the allowance is broken down according to age in terms of how much is allocated for the child, and then according to what their needs are. But the basic needs that must be covered within the allowance will be their clothing. It will be household, and when we talk about household, that's a contribution from the allowance that we're recognising that's going towards your utilities, you know, wear and tear on the house, maybe redecorating, you know, parts of the house that children may have, you know, maybe, you know, not really respected in the way you would expect. So maybe there's, you know, dirty hands, or, you know, ways in which they might have, you know, your decor needs to be replenished now and again. So within the household part of the allowance, we build in that amount to, you know, cover what might be needed for general household wear and tear. There's also food that's included. So of course, no child should ever be hungry in foster care. One of the significant reasons for children coming into care can often be around neglect, which would be about withholding of food and no food that is in there, that they've had to scrabble around for scraps, or they have gone hungry and starving. And so it's really important that food, is provided, and, that nurturing and nourishing of healthy meals is something that our children come to really appreciate, because this will be something that might be quite new for them in knowing and accepting that there's another meal coming throughout the course of the day. When children have experienced the effect of not knowing if another meal was coming, or they may behave in ways that you again may not be familiar with. They may start to hoard food, they may start to overeat, they may not eat, but their relationship with food can be quite significant when there has been some trauma around neglect, where food has either been withheld or not provided. So it's really important that children come into care knowing that they are going to have healthy, nourishing meals around the day. There's an amount in the allowance that covers for their personal needs, which can be toiletries, hair care, skin care, ensuring that children have the necessary grooming items that they need for them to again feel good about themselves. And that's why that is built in there in the allowance, so that no child in care should ever be made to feel that there's not enough money for them to be able to look presentable, to feel good, to have a haircut or their hair done in a way that they want it done, to ensure that for children of color, where their skin needs extra nourishment of creams and lotions, that's all provided. So in the personal part of the budget, that is allowed for. In terms of transport, children may need to get buses or need an Oyster card. I think now I'm catching up on the fact that I think the Oyster card isn't free anymore. I think you have to pay, children have to pay on public transport. So there's an amount within the allowance to ensure that children can get from A to B in terms of their school journey, or if they're going to see friends, or that any transport expenses are and can be met. Then they have a sliding scale of pocket money that starts from around about £5 to £7 when they're very young. And this is all about helping children to understand money in terms of budgeting and understanding how money works. So they have their allowance of their pocket money that should be given to them every week. And that money, is given for them to, buy their little magazines or extra things that they might need. Some carers are very creative in how they might build up their pocket money for special occasions like holidays or Christmas, where they can have that fund that might have built up where they've not used all their pocket money, but that over at a time in the year where they want to spend a little bit more, they do have that little savings that has built up, and they can have extra things that they might want. So pocket money is really important for children to learn how to spend, save, and understand the value of money, and just as you would with your own children, help them to really respect how to use money sensibly and in a way that would be appropriate. So as the child gets older, between 5 and 10, it rises up to about £9. When they're at secondary school, we allow for £11, and then when they're getting towards mid-teens, it's nearer £18. So that money should be given to them. For the older children, it's important that you ask them to sign and acknowledge that the money has been paid, so that they they're aware and you're aware that the money has been paid, and if there's any issues that you can go back to the record where that was accounted for. I'm going to come on to savings, but it's always a good idea to have a savings, a bank account for the child, and we encourage that. We know that there's some situations where getting a bank account can be difficult because of the requirements that is needed to open an account. So some children may not have ID, birth certificates, or the necessary paperwork for the account to be opened, but that can be an ongoing discussion with the local authority. So it is important that there's a way in which the money that hasn't been used can be accumulated and put into an account. If the child doesn't have their own bank account, you can use a part of your own account to have that money allocated in that account for the child, and then when it's possible to then have a bank account for the child that can then be transferred. We ask for you to put any surplus monies into what we're talking about in terms of a bank account or a savings account, so that that can be built up. But Banya also take at source £10 a week out of your allowance before you get your amount that you will receive each week. So there is an amount, £10, that's saved for on behalf of each child in foster care, that's taken from source. And then, as I've said, any surplus monies that haven't been spent from the allowances, so for example the clothing allowances, amounts to around about, so it starts at £28 for a young child between 0 to 4. So each week you might not need to spend £28-30 every week on clothing, but if over a month that would be £120, you haven't spent all of that on clothing, the surplus can go into the account where you're building up an account for the child. And then if there's extra things that they want, or more expensive things, maybe school shoes, or a particular maybe a trainers, or something that's going to be more expensive and a bigger outlay, then you've got that amount that you can put towards the weekly amount that you're allocated to be able to spend if you need to. So it's really important to use your discretion about allocation of the funds. As the children get older, so towards sort of 11 upwards, we are looking at £30 a week, which is 60, so that's £120 a month. So each month the child would get that 120. Now you wouldn't necessarily have to need to give the child 120 at the end of each month. You might give them £60 and put the other £60 away, and then work out with them, if they need to dip into the other 60, that money can be used as and when is required. So it's really important to try and build up that trusting relationship with your young people around money. Show them where the money's been saved, show them how it's been built up in terms of accumulating, and let them see that by saving even £10 a week out of clothing allowance, so their clothing allowance for £30 a week, they could save £10, and over the month they've got an extra £40 where they've only used £20 per week for the clothing. And then that £40, they may want to continue saving that, or they may want to buy something that they've decided that they want to have, that they feel that they have saved towards. But it's really important that you help children to understand the importance of budgeting and saving, and understanding how money works. I'm going to go on to we talked, I know it was mentioned earlier about how much tax is taken from foster carers. It's useful just to say that there is a government website that we use to help you calculate your tax, and it's always advised that you have an accountant who, because you are regarded as self-employed, your amount is actually not affected, as Nasha mentioned earlier. If you have less than 3 children, where you've got the allowances equivalent to 3 children per week, your allowances wouldn't be affected in terms of tax accounting. But if you have got more than 3 children and you are working, it's always important to ensure that your calculations with a tax advisor or an accountant is worked out over each financial year, so that you're not left with an unexpected tax bill that you're not expecting over the year. Okay. I've talked about bank accounts for children. When you set up as a foster carer, it is expected that you are what we call ready, foster care ready to take a child into your home. And that means that we would expect that the room is kitted out with appropriate furniture and bedding, that there's a wardrobe, a chest of door, bed and bedding. If it's child that would need a car seat up to the age of 11, I believe, that you have the correct car seat or booster seat that would be required to transport the child in your own car. So that's really important that you do have all the equipment ready and set up. But the room should be, as you would expect, just as when you would go and stay with, a friend or family, or if you were going to a hotel, that the room is inviting and clean and input and set up in a way that enables that child to feel that they are being welcomed into your home and that thought has been put into the presentation of the room. Obviously, over time, that room will become the child's room where they may want to add to the decor or, put their personal artifacts and belongings, in a way that makes it feel like it's theirs. And that's obviously, perfectly acceptable and expected. But again, in terms of the allowances, it may be that the child wants to save up for, something to go into their room that they particularly like. It might be a painting or photo frames that they want to buy to put significant photographs in. So, the room should very much feel like they can claim it as their own and make it personalized to their taste and their preferences. In terms of just going back to the types of placements that we provide for children in care, there's what we call a standard placement, that's going to be the majority of our placements. All of our placements, in terms of children coming into care, they will have some level of need and challenge. Children don't come into care for no good reason or no reason at all. So the fact that they've had to come into the care system, you can pretty much guarantee that there has been something that's gone wrong in their background, family situation or circumstances. So when we talk about challenges, we expect that there will be a level of challenge because children's lives have been disrupted for one reason or another. So that's what we call the standard placements. Now, over and beyond the standard placement, there may be children who have what we might call additional needs. So they have extra needs that need to be supported with extra funding and support to enable those needs to be met. And that's what we call placements that will come with an enhanced rate. But there is a specific understanding of what those extra additional needs are that is over and beyond what we call the standard placements, which are children who've come into care, but they still have the challenges and requirements of the work that's needed to support them. So our standard placements are the £400 a week that I mentioned earlier on, minus the respite money coming out and the savings. And then our enhanced rate will be calculated according to what is required in terms of additional needs that the child might have. And then we have what we call respite placements and emergency placements. So those are placements that come through our referral process, the emergency placements, that might be anything from a couple of hours, an overnight, to maybe a couple of days or even a couple of weeks. But they really are an emergency, an immediate need where those children need to be looked after by referral from the local authority. So you have to expect those placements to happen at any time. They may happen, at 5 o'clock on a Tuesday afternoon, or they may happen at 2 a.m. on a Saturday, early hours of the morning, Sunday morning. So they come in, by virtue of the emergency system. Respite placements are more planned. So these can be, it could be your own children going into a respite placement, or they may be coming from another carer to you, or they may be, you may ask for respite because you've got to be away or deal with something urgently where you can't take the child with you. So those are, that's another type of placement. Then we have parent and child placements, which are a specialist type of placement, and those attract 2 allowances in one placement, where the parent or parents, because sometimes we have both parents being placed in these placements, and the child or the baby or the child or children can be placed with their parents within a fostering setup. And those placements are specialist placements. The carers will have had specialist training, and there's a requirement that the foster carer is really providing the care by way of assessing those parents in terms of their parenting skills, and they're supporting those parents to become parents who can provide the required standard of care for the child. So your role does slightly change within a parent and child placement situation or referral. Right, I've talked about enhanced fees. Okay. So, I don't know if there's any questions, Mappa. Who's on the line?
I don't see any questions right now, but please let us know in the chat if you have any questions, and we will answer them, or we will ask Verna for you guys. We do have one question. It is not directly about the, oh, I am so sorry, my camera. It is not necessarily about this topic. The question is it the same process for adoption as it is for becoming a foster carer?
The same process in terms of being assessed?
Yes, exactly.
It's a very similar process in terms of being assessed. Whereas for fostering, the report is a Form F. For adoption, it's what we call a PAR, which is a prospective adopters report. But it is a very similar format in terms of the kinds of questions that you get asked. We want to build up very much a profile and a picture of you in terms of your upbringing as a child, what you've got to offer in terms of your reasons for wanting to adopt, whether you're a couple or a single person. We talk about your finances, relationships, your understanding of the needs of children who come into care, your education, your employment. So the format of the report is a very similar process. The difference with adoption is that adoption means that once you're approved as an adoptive parent, you will then be, and Banya isn't an adoption agency, so it's important just to emphasize that. You would have to source an adoption agency that's approved as an agency who can approve adopters. You can go to a local authority or an independent adoption agency. And when you then become approved as an adoptive parent, you're then matched with a specific child. It goes through a different process in terms of the child that then comes into your home. So you're matched with that child, you go to a panel, and the child is then placed with you. And then there's a legal process by which you will then apply to become the legal parent over a period of time after the child has been with you. And then you become what then is regarded as the legal parent. So all of the parental responsibility that was that had been allocated to the birth parent now is transferred to you. So the birth parents lose their parental rights and you become the legal parent. Okay. That's it in a nutshell, in a very quick whistle stop nutshell. Yeah.
Thank you for that. We also have another question. It says, if I have a child for 2 months in a year, do I receive the respite allowance?
So if you've had the child for 2 months, the respite money will have come out, and you will get that money at the end of in July. So if you had a child in November and December, there can, yeah, I mean, I was just thinking there can be a way that you might get that money. If we know that the placement has ended and the child is not coming back, you might be able to have that money at the end of the placement. But the money is paid annually every July. So you will always get what's accumulated from the period that the child was with you.
Okay. And then another question says, if I don't use my respite throughout the year, does it mean I can carry over the respite allowance to the following year?
Oh, well, you've earned, because it is your money, and it, you know, you will have accumulated it throughout the year, so it is paid back to you. I guess you could, you know, it's your money, so you can have that to put into your own savings account, you know, because it's your money and it is paid out to you at the end of each year. If you wanted it to carry over, I guess you could have a one-to-one discussion with our finance team. But, you know, by all accounts, in terms of the routine, the regular kind of way that it works, is that that money is paid to you at the end of each year, in July of each year.
Mhm. Okay. And we have another question. Do you foster children in your borough or outside?
Right. So if you live so I think it was mentioned earlier on that if you fostered for a local authority, the children would just come from that borough. By fostering for Banya, we cover across the whole country. So a child, if you lived in Lambeth, you could get a child from anywhere in the country. So you could also get a child from Lambeth. Was that your question?
Yes, if you foster, yeah, and they are saying yes, that's it. Okay, that's good to know. That's a little bit surprising for me because I thought that you would need to keep children within their own environment, so it was only children who live nearby. But that's very interesting to know.
Not if you, so because I can see a question that's come up about schooling. So when we come to look at matching a child with you, so if you're, for example, in Lambeth and you've got a Lambeth child, the likelihood is that the child will have been going to school in that borough. So that might make it easier for you to get that child to school. But by the same token, if you're fostering, if you're living in Lambeth and you get a child from Croydon or Wandsworth or Lewisham, those are what is regarded as neighbouring boroughs. So they're within, you know, a 3 to sort of 5 mile radius. Arrangements for transporting the child to school can also be made. So it won't restrict you from taking children outside of your borough. I mean, obviously, you're not going to take a child from way across the other side of London, because in terms of getting that child to school, the logistics of that obviously would be more complicated. But it certainly doesn't restrict you from taking a child from within the surrounding boroughs of the borough that you live in.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Please let us know if that answers your question or if you have another question. And separate from that question, we're asked, if you have an enhanced placement, does it mean the respite allowance is also enhanced?
No. The same amount gets taken out for the respite, regardless of the enhanced rate. Yeah.
Okay, excellent.
But I would say with with an enhanced rate, some of those children will have quite complex needs, as I've said, over and beyond, and some of them might have disabilities. So some of them, those children with disabilities, may well attract a disability living allowance, which is a separate benefit that can be applied for the child, and that will give you an additional income to support the placement for, you know, extra support, respite, or additional support that you might need.